To be or not to be? That is the question. What is up, guys? The new Bonnie here, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys a thing or two about Shakespeare. Alrighty, you guys, so unfortunately there's not a whole lot that we actually really truly know about William Shakespeare, and a lot of things that we think we know about him today are still being conflicted and being brought up in arguments amongst historians. A lot isn't known because there wasn't a whole lot of record back then, and all historians can go off of is his poems, his plays, and some other historical documents such as church records and whatever else have you. We do know just a little bit about him, though, and I'm going to be going over some of that with you guys. So some things we do know are about his family. His father was actually a very successful leather merchant, and this helped with his education. Shakespeare's education is one of those huge topics that people are still debating about today, mainly because his father was a successful leather merchant, and he also held a position very high up, and a lot of people say it was as close to a mayoral office as you could possibly get. This meaning that even though we don't have documented records of Shakespeare's early education life, this could hint at the fact that he should have had a full ride, like scholarships and whatnot, or that his tuition was just paid for. Either way, if this is the case, a lot of people are debating whether or not he actually attended school and whether or not he actually authored a lot of his plays and his own pieces of work. Although Shakespeare already had a pretty big family consisting of his 2 older sisters and his 3 younger brothers, he ended up making his family even bigger when he married Anne Hathaway in 1582, and those two together ended up having their first child because she was pregnant at the time, who they called Susanna, and about 2 years later they ended up having another set of twins, Judith and Hamnet, and unfortunately Hamnet ended up dying at about 11 years of age. After the birth of his 2 twins in 1585, and from then until 1592, through that 7-year span is what we call the lost years. These are years that we weren't actually for sure what was happening with Shakespeare at the time. A lot of speculation believes that he was either trying to lay low from his landlord because he was poaching, or a more reasonable explanation would be that he was traveling to London at the time and trying to produce more and get into more like acting in bigger time shows and plays, because that's what was happening over in London at that time. But historians found him again in 1592, and we saw where he ended up going, and that was, in fact, to London. And in fact, he actually joined he joined a group known as the Kingsmen. And no, I'm not talking about the secret service of spies that comes out of a tuxedo shop. I'm talking about a big-time show production and playwright deal or something like that. After Shakespeare kind of made a bigger name for himself and gained more of a reputation, it was about 1597 at the time, he had actually produced over 14 of his own plays and was starting to really bring in the big bucks for the family. And with that, he was actually able to buy his own house. He bought the second biggest house at Stratford, and this was to help raise his bigger family and just keep them happy. Now, unfortunately, things started to take a darker turn, and a few years later, he ended up dying at the age of 52. But during his lifespan, he made over 36 plays. He's written countless amounts of poems, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about today, is the amazing works of art that he has created through his poetry. One of the poems that I want to be discussing with you guys today is A Lover's Complaint, a tale of basically heartbreak. And you can find all of these awesome Shakespeare's his poems, his sonnets, you can find them all at shakespeare.mit. That's where I found this one. But it's a story of how this maiden is pretty much heartbroken, and she's throwing out all the possessions of this man that has not only wronged her once, but wronged her twice. And she has fallen for it once again. But a man comes to her, and he is asking what's wrong, and she lays out the whole story for him. But besides it just sounding like a whole lot of complaining for an entire poem, just someone commenting about something on Facebook is really what it sounds like. There's actually a lot to it. Now, a lot of people might not think so right away. Like, you see your friends in high school will break up with someone that they think is terrible, and then they'll get right back with them the next week. Well, sometimes we don't always think about it, but sometimes when you really, really care about something, or you really think you love someone, and you don't know anything outside of that, and you finally get rid of it, you finally get the parasite out of your life, you kind of want it back because that's all you know, and you don't really know anything else outside of it. So that's kind of what the whole story is about. But it's full of good imagery, it's full of symbolism, it's got everything to it, and it's honestly just a great story within a poem, with lines like, "Her hair, nor loose nor tied in formal plait, proclaimed in her a careless hand of pride." This shows us that her hair is kind of like, it's messy, but it's not super horrible in a way that she just doesn't give a shit about anything anymore. It's showing that she's lost a lot of care, but there's still something left to her, and it's kind of a whole eye-opener for the imagination to just kind of grasp, and you just kind of think, what does this mean to you? And then we got stuff like, "1,000 favors from a mond she drew, of amber, crystal, and of beaded jet, which one by one she in a river threw." This is showing us that she's taking a bunch of these rocks and charms and whatever else that this man has given her, and she is trying to get rid of all the bad baggage. She does not want this anymore. She's throwing these rocks, this opal, the emerald, whatever else she's been giving. She's tossing it into a river. It's very easy to see this, and he does a very good job of illustrating it for us. Shakespeare also uses a lot of really odd words because his poems are Old English. We're not used to the way that they spoke then. In fact, society's probably dumbed down a lot since then. But using words such as sepulchres, or sepulchers, I think is how you would pronounce it now, meaning it's a tomb it's basically like a concrete tomb that someone is buried in, but he uses it in a reference to mud, as in burying something away, like not just something dying and you burying the corpse, but really burying deep thoughts and emotions that you don't want to have anymore. And he also uses some of his own words, because if you've read a couple of Shakespeare's plays, you'll know that he throws some words together to make them kind of his own, with like, habitude is one of them. It's a mixture of habitual and attitude, meaning that it's a habitual way of behaving. So he's got a really cool, really crafty way of throwing his words together. It's kind of hard to understand, but if you guys go through some Spark Notes, you can basically find the meaning of all these poems, but you still need to read through them to see what exactly the author is trying to illustrate for you. Now, while this poem may not be just absolutely littered with them, a lot of Shakespeare's poems have tons of figures of speech. So this is the last line from the poem. "Oh, that infected moisture of his eye, oh, that false fire which in his cheeks so glowed, oh, that forced thunder from his heart did fly, oh, that sad breath his spongy lungs bestowed, oh, all that borrowed motion seeming owed, would yet again betray the fore-betrayed, and the new pervert a reconciled maid." So it's full of this stuff, guys. You got words like the sad breath, the spongy lungs. He's really trying to bring to life just like organs. Like, you don't think of something as sad, it's just kind of functioning. But he has a certain way of bringing not only inanimate objects, but words themselves to life. There's even a lot of symbolism within most of his poems. Again, with this one, there isn't too much, but there is a reference in the very beginning of the poem when he talks about how she's throwing papers and rings out. Papers sometimes written in blood, meaning that there's letters and these rings and other gifts that the man that has betrayed her twice now has given her, and she is once again throwing out all the bad baggage that she doesn't want. A lot of scholarly critics at Britannica.com agree that even though Shakespeare isn't as concrete as a lot of other people are with their plays and their poetry, that he is still a master of the arts of comedy and tragedy alike. This is why I think you guys really need to go check out Shakespeare, not only for his amazing plays, but also for all the poetry that he comes up with, because it's very not really convoluted, but it's really complex, and it really gets all the gears cranking in your mind and makes you think about life, about emotions. Shakespeare does an amazing job of capturing human emotions, and that's what I got for you guys. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.